If your enemies get a bit much for you, you can always call on your dead relatives for a hand. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today sees the channel's first Eldar video. I'm afraid this one's an individual request. It's not going to be the start of any new Eldar series on the channel as of yet. I'm certainly hoping that we get to all the 40k factions somewhere down the line. I don't do all that many individual video requests on the channel, though this one sort of interested me and I felt like making a video, so I am. If you do have any other video ideas, then feel free to check out the channel's Discord server in the link below, where I've just added a new video suggestion channel if there's anything that you'd particularly like to see. I also do fairly regular polls on the channel's Patreon page as well, where you can vote on what's likely to come next. All that aside, we're going to look at the Wraithguard and Wraithblades in this video, take a look at their datasheet, any obvious rules, synergies and combos on the tabletop, and how I would run them in games of 40k. In the background, the Wraithguard are of course fallen Eldar warriors, with their spirit stones removed from the Infinity Circuit and implanted into biomechanical Wraithguard armor suits. Wraithguard are far smaller in size than the mighty Wraithlords and Wraith Knights, and are classically armed with the mighty Wraith Cannon, which is a short-ranged potent weapon that opens a small rift into the warp, sucking the target or pieces of the target directly into the Immaterium. Wraithguard have somewhat of a transient presence in the material realm, and they see with what's known as Wraith Sight, perceiving the psychic nature of their targets through a lens of the warp, as opposed to directly seeing them, and it can make them sometimes a little ponderous and slow to react to actual real-world changing battlefield events. They are therefore often guided by spirit seers on the battlefield to help lead them to the destruction of their targets. Wraithblades are a close combat variant of Wraithguard, with ancestor spirits who are particularly seething with anger at their fate, and once unleashed on the hated foes of the Eldar, lay about them with mighty ghost axes and ghost swords with a frenzied fury. Tradition holds that each Craftworld keeps these vengeful constructs segregated from the majority of their ghost warriors, so their anger does not become contagious, seeping across to the other Wraithguard. Let's see what these mighty constructs can do on the tabletop then. So here we have the datasheet for the Wraithguard, with credit of course going to Warhammer for the excellent datasheet. Wraithguard are an elite choice for Codex Craftworlds, and will cost you 33 points ahead when armed with a Wraith Cannon. They have a pretty decent impressive defensive profile considering Eldar infantry. They have a movement of 5 inches, weapon skill 3 and ballistic skill 3, strength 5, toughness 6, 3 wounds, 1 attack, leadership 9 and a 3+ save. Each model is armed with a Wraith Cannon and Wraithguard fists. They're certainly comparatively tough for their points cost. Having toughness 6 and 3 wounds and a 3+ save means that small arms are rarely going to be efficient against them. They're going to need anti-tank firepower to take them down with any degree of certainty. They are a little bit slow moving of course, so will need some sort of way of getting to grips with the foe. Their Wraith Cannons are pretty powerful affairs but short ranged, 12-inch range, assault 1 weapons with strength 10, AP -4 and damage d6. Basically they will tear holes in things, but they're not going to do massive damage against all but the heaviest infantry due to their low number of shots in the squad. Their Wraithguard fists do pack a bit of a punch in close combat. They'll be strength 5 with AP -1 and damage d3. In general, Wraithguard aren't the best in melee with their 1 attack each, but they can surprise an unwary foe who thinks they can just lock them up with a tough melee unit. A biggish squad will generally smash through a few wounds on a hard target. Their other option is to upgrade to the D-Scythe, which is an extra 4 points over the standard Wraith Cannon, so it's 37 points in total, and it has an 8-inch range, assault d3, strength 10, AP -4 and damage 1. It automatically hits its target, meaning that these things are going to tear a bit of a hole in pretty much everything that they touch. On average the Wraith Cannons are just a little bit better against hard targets, but only very mildly so. 5 of them in range will average around about 8 wounds on your standard toughness 7 or 8 vehicle, where the D-size will average about 6 or 7. The main advantage in my mind to the Wraith Cannon is its slightly longer range and lower points cost, which means that it can shoot enemies when coming out of Deep Strike Reserve, which the D-Scythe unfortunately cannot. Range accepted, D-Scythes are going to be more potent against virtually any target, and particularly more so against anything that's got a -1 to hit modifier. In terms of abilities, they have Ancient Doom, should you get into combat with some Slaneshi people, and far more usefully they have Implacable, which means that you can fall them back and they can still shoot in a turn that they do so. Very useful insurance about getting locked up, provided you don't get one of the models tri-pointed and unable to fall back. Let's move on to looking at their close combat cousins now. The Wraithblades are also an elite's choice, and again you can include anywhere between 5 and 10 of them, and they'll cost you 35 points a model, whether they're armed with ghost swords or a ghost axe and force shield, which are their two options. They have a similar profile to their Wraithguard cousins, the main exception being that instead of having one attack they have 2 attacks, which is very helpful indeed. Those ghost swords get you an additional attack on top of that, so that's 3 attacks at base, with strength +1, AP -3 and damage 1. They will do decent work against virtually any targets, but not having multi-damage means that they're fairly suboptimal against big multi-wound targets such as vehicles. The Ghost Axe and Force Shield is interesting. Instead of getting the additional attack, you unfortunately subtract 1 from the hit roll, so you're only hitting on 4s. However, you do gain strength +2, so that's strength 7, AP -3, and this time they do get D3 damage. So they will do decent damage to your vehicles, although they're nowhere near as good against toughness 8 vehicles, which they'll typically be wounding on 5s. One of the main advantages of the Ghost Axe is they get a Force Shield, which massively amps up their survivability. They gain a 4+ invul save as part of this, and for me this tips me into saying that the Ghost Axe is pretty much always the way to go with them. A 4+ invul is great on a multi-wound high toughness target, and this can be increased even more with something like Protect from your nearby Warlock or Spirit Seer. In terms of special rules, they again have Ancient Doom for fighting Slanesh in close combat, a bit more meaningful on these guys, and they have Fires of Wrath, which means they add +1 to their attacks characteristic in any turn in which they charge. This means that on average a squad of 5 with Ghost Axes will do around 6 wounds to your average toughness 7 vehicle, or about 6 wounds to your standard Primaris Intercessors. The swords on the other hand will do about 4 wounds to your standard vehicle, or about 8 wounds to your Intercessors, and they're far better against infantry, due to their damage not mainly coming from D3 damage on the damage profile. I'd say that the swords and the axes are fairly comparable in damage output, with the axes having more versatility against hard targets, but for me out of the two that Force Shield defensive upgrade just swings it in the favour of the axes nevertheless. It doesn't really matter too much if you have great damage output if you're already dead. So let's talk about different ways that we can get more out of them on the battlefield then. In terms of Craftword abilities, Elatok is always a solid choice, having -1 to hit from greater than 12 inches away. Will certainly protect them from the heavy guns that are sat at the back, although both of these units are needing to get right up in the face of the enemy, which might mean that you don't get it quite as much as other times. Iandin's attribute unfortunately isn't very good for Wraithguard, which is a bit unfortunate and contrary to their fluff, but they do have some other decent options, including the Stratagem Guided Wraith Sight, which you use on a Spirit Seer, and it gives them a 12-inch aura of re-rolling all failed hit rolls. Obviously not so good for the D-Scythes who don't need it, but great for the Wraithblades or the Wraith Cannons. They also have the Citronome of Iandin, which has amazing synergy with the Wraithblades. You use it on an Iandin Psyker, and once per battle you can activate it, doubling the attacks characteristics of any friendly Wraith Construct units within 6 inches of the Psyker. It does cause D3 mortal wounds on that unit at the end of the phase, but in my opinion it's well worth it, as with that comboed with the Warlord trait means that you could be getting 6 Ghost Axe attacks, and with the Warlord trait you could be re-rolling those failed hits of 1 and 2 as well, and just with those 2 buffs you wind up doing around about 16 or 17 wounds to your standard toughness 7 vehicle, which is well over double. If you're prepared to invest in Warlord traits and relics, then Iandin is a good shout. Other than that, Orthwy is also very solid for them, as their 6+ Feel No Pain is excellent on Wraith Constructs, and is particularly potent at protecting these guys from flat damage 3 weapons, which would normally chew through them in short order. From the new custom Craftworld traits, we have Expert Crafters, where those rerolls can be particularly good on something like a D-Cannon Wraithguard unit, as getting an extra hit roll and wound roll per turn is absolutely great. Wrath of the Dead can give you yet more rerolls, basically rerolling any wound rolls of 1 made by Wraith Constructs, which will equate to a flat 17% damage increase to every single attack they make, which is pretty damn good. Savage Blades could be useful on Wraithblades, rerolling hit rolls of 1 when they charge. Webway Warriors could be handy for additional deep strikes. Headstrong could be good on the Wraithblades due to adding +1 to the charge roll, which could be very handy if you're deep striking them in from the Webway. And Strike and Fade could potentially be useful for jumping out of combat and charging back in. For me though, Expert Crafters, Wrath of the Dead are really strong on any of them, though Savage Blades and Headstrong certainly compete well for Wraithblades. In terms of character support, Wraithguard and particularly Wraithblades can be units that can really be buffed up to be incredibly strong. They can be made incredibly tough indeed, with Conceal plus Protect, which could give you a -1 to hit unit of Wraithblades with a 3+ invul save. Quicken could also be great for getting them up the board fast. With Wraithguard in particular, you could still even advance them and fire their weapons. Empower could also be great for Wraithblades, adding +1 to wound rolls in the fight phase. From the Runes of Fate, Guide is of course excellent for Wraith Cannons and Doom for their targets. Fortune is a really powerful defensive buff, giving them a 5+ feel no pain gets them even more defense against anything like flat damage 3 weapons. And from the new Runes of Fortune from Blood of the Phoenix, Ghost Walk could be great on Wraithblades for +2 to charges, which means they could be very reliable charging out of the webway, and Fateful Divergence is yet another source of rerolls. In addition, Autarchs could be an option for providing the standard reroll hit roll 1s if necessary. The Avatar of Cain could provide you with some reroll charges if you can keep him alive long enough, and Spirit Seers can potentially allow you another source of reroll hit rolls of 1, but it has to be against units that are within 6 inches of him, which is pretty limiting to be honest. From the Vigilus Defiant book we have access to the Wraith Host, one of those specialist detachments that cost you 1 command point to field, and gives you access to a Warlord trait relic and 2 stratagems. The Warlord trait, which you can buy in for 1 extra command point via the Field Commander stratagem, is Revered by the Dead, which can give you reroll charges for your nearby Wraith Construct units, although this one does have to be placed on a Spirit Seer. Could be another way of trying to guarantee those Wraithguard actually make it into combat, though delivering the Spirit Seer alongside them is a little bit problematic. It might mean that they need to drop out of the webway right next to him. They also have a psychic power called Twilight Gloom, which can be handy for putting your Wraithguard in cover even when they aren't, and this could get very powerful indeed if you combine it with Protect as well, giving you effectively 1+ save Wraithguard or Wraithblades. Of course, one still fail, but they're just a bit more resistant to high AP weapons. In terms of stratagems, they have Wrath of the Dead for 1 command point. This is a nice, simple and effective one, where you add 1 to the attacks characteristics of models in the unit until the end of the phase. So this one could give you 4 attack Wraithblades with axes, or 5 attack Wraithblades with swords, and potentially double either of those numbers if they also have the Citry Gnome of Eandon about. Not a bad use of 1 command point, particularly on a big unit. The other one is Spirit Shield, and it's an interesting little option for Wraithguard units beside a Spirit Seer. Basically the Spirit Seer foregoes its 4+ invul save, and the 4+ invul save gets given to the Wraith Construct unit within 6 inches of him. It is only 1 construct unit, so I think that this will be best for buffing a huge unit of Wraithguard who don't normally get that invul save. It will certainly make them a lot meatier to chew through, although it does cost 2 command points to activate this ability, so it's hardly cheap. Really solid options though, and I think that the Wraith Host is certainly a decent idea if you are running a lot of these Wraith constructs. In terms of stratagems, Matchless Agility could help get them up the field that little bit faster, and it's particularly good on Wraithguard if you need to get their assault weapons in range, and Fire and Fade can allow you to fire some Wraithguard and then move another 7 inches as if it were the movement phase, meaning that you could be getting some absolutely crazy movement out of these guys, particularly when combined with a Warlock with Quicken. You could theoretically use Tears of Isha for 2 CP to regain D3 lost wounds on a Wraith construct, but it's usually not going to be worth it for the command point investment. Feigned Retreat could give you fallback and charge for your Wraithblades, allowing them to not be targeted by an irrelevant foe, and to jump back and engage what they actually want to attack. And we've already mentioned Webway Strike, where for a few command points you can put your Wraithguard or Wraithblades in Deep Strike Reserve, set them up greater than 9 inches away, then either try and shoot them down with your Wraith Cannons or make a charge with your Wraithblades, and this is generally my favourite way to get them to the battlefront. Another major way to increase their mobility is to put them in a Wave Serpent, which with 16 inches movement can get them up the board very quickly and is non-trivial to take out. You can only get a squad of 6 of them in this, but it pretty much gives them a very good chance of actually getting them to be able to get in range to use their weapons, and a Wave Serpent full of Wraith constructs is certainly very scary for the opponent. This would be my preferred way of loading up D-size and getting them towards the opponent, as they really do need to be close, and Webway isn't ideal because it puts them out of range when they drop in. So how would I actually use these guys in battle then? Personally, I think that the best use in a more competitive Eldar list is to get a really big strong squad of Wraithblades and load them up with the many close combat buffs that you have available, whether that's just running them in the Wraith Host and using that stratagem, or perhaps taking them in Eandon and use the Citronome to give them 1 turn of absolutely mental attacks. I'd want to combine this with some sort of psychic defensive buffs, where a Warlock with Protect would be my first choice, as 3+ invul save 3 wound models aren't going anywhere fast, and will create a really meaty distraction for your opponent to chew through, instead of being able to target your other units. In general, I'd put these guys in reserve and have them come down turn 2, ideally with some sort of charge buff, depending on whether you're playing a custom Craftworld or or can use the +2 to charge power, or reroll charges via the Wraith host, and you can always put a command reroll in there on top of that. Ideally I'd want to hit the enemy and try and take out a key threat, maybe wrap and trap a unit, and just generally make themselves a massive problem for the opponent while the rest of your army is sneaky around, gunning down other things. I generally prefer these guys to Wraithguard largely because of the invul save, which means that they aren't as easily mopped up, which I think is a danger for the Wraithguard. Wraithguard with D cannons I'd be tempted to deep strike, ones with D scythes I'd be tempted to push in a wave serpent, although all of them against the right list could potentially start on the board, in which case you'd likely want to be starting them front and centre, protected by psychic buffs where possible, particularly things like Protect and Fortune, and move towards the enemy, having a very low threshold for advancing if you don't think you're going to be able to make meaningful damage in any given turn. You can then use them to pretty much dominate the midfield, and at least make your opponent back off if they don't want to get hit by distort weapons or charged with axes. If you are putting them on the board, they do need to be somewhere where they can get towards the enemy as fast as possible, as you just don't want them to be ignored sat at the back somewhere, while the opponent picks off the rest of your army as a priority. Overall, I think that they can be competitive in an Eldar army, but you do need to invest a fair bit in making them work, which means that they aren't quite as easy point-and-click units as some of the units that they have. I think their durability, particularly when souped up with psychic spells, is one of their biggest factors, and provided you can make your opponent chew through them as the priority, rather than focusing on your more fragile units, then you're generally going to be in for a good time. So, thank you for listening to an Auspex Tactics video. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to hear more general 40k thoughts, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts and ideas down in the comments. If there's any synergies with Wraithguard or Wraithblades that I've missed, hopefully we'll get round to covering Eldar in more detail at some point in the future, though I think that Admech and Deathwatch are on the cards next, after Space Wolves and Orcs. As I said, if you'd like to leave me any video ideas, please feel free to take a look at the Auspex Tactics Discord server. The link is in the description below. It's absolutely free to use, and there's plenty of intelligent people on there for thoughts and feedback on anything from lore to rules queries. In any case, a big thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.